Much for joining us today for Senate Education Committee meeting. We are going to start off with our hearing on Senate Bill 2092. That's reapportioning the districts for certain members of the Washburn University Board of Regents who are appointed by the City of Topeka. So we will start off with an overview from our reviser, Tamara Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, committee. House Bill 2092, as amended by House Committee, would amend the statutes that provide for the appointment of members of the Washburn University Board of Regents. Currently, the mayor of Topeka appoints 4 members of the board. 1 is appointed from the city at large, and 3 are appointed from each of the 3 state senatorial districts that overlap with Topeka city territory. However, beginning in January of 2025, the new state senatorial districts that were enacted into law last year in Senate Bill 563 as a result of the redistricting process. So this means that there will be 4 senatorial districts that overlap with Topeka city territory and only 3 Washburn University Board of Regents appointments. So a portion of Topeka would be unrepresented on the board. House Bill 2092 would replace the current requirement of 1 member from each senatorial district with 3 member districts that would be established in the bill based on existing Topeka City Council districts as follows. District 1 would consist of City Council districts 2, 3, and 4. District 2 would consist of City Council districts 1, 5, and 6. And District 3 would consist of districts 7, 8, and 9. The mayor would be required to appoint 1 member of the board from each of the new districts. Appointments would be made as the term of the current member for those board positions expire. The bill would take effect on July 1st upon publication in the statute book and did pass the House on a vote of 124-0. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Committee, what questions do you have? Seeing none, thank you very much, Tamara. Do want to say a special thank you to Senator Dietrich because she did bring this forward for us. So we appreciate that. At this time, I'd like to welcome Dr. Julianne Mazachek, President of Washburn University, for us for her testimony. Welcome to committee.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair Baumgartner, and thank you all members of the committee. And I want to especially say thank you to our Shawnee County delegation for supporting this bill and bringing it forward. The Washburn University Board of Regents comprises 9 members appointed by the governor, mayor, county commission, or the Kansas Board of Regents. Washburn University Regents are singularly responsible for the operation of the university. Currently, the mayor of Topeka is statutorily authorized to appoint 3 city residents to serve on the Washburn Board of Regents and selects 1 regent from each of the 3 state Senate districts in Topeka. And just as our revisers shared, that changed in the last reapportionment. State Senate reapportionment approved by the legislature last year created a 4th Senate district containing a portion of the city of Topeka. This caused the need to adjust how the mayor appoints future regents. House Bill 2092 amends the statute by allowing city council districts to be used as boundaries rather than state Senate districts. We believe it's essential to have each of the 3 Washburn campuses represented by a regent, and as such, we have identified 3 districts associated with those city council districts. Washburn District 1 would be districts 2, 3, and 4. Washburn District 2 would be 1, 5, and 6. And Washburn District 3 would be 7, 8, and 9. And essentially, roughly, that is the east, the central, and the west side of Topeka. I am pleased to answer any questions you might have at the appropriate time, and thank you for allowing my testimony today.
We are at that point in time. So committee, do you have any questions for the president? So again, this is addressing the issue that occurred with redistricting so that you have appropriate representation.
Yes.
So we appreciate that so much. Senator O'Shea, did you have any comment that you wanted to share? No? Okay. Senator Dietrich.
Thank you. I really appreciate you being here. This is our new president of Washburn University, so thank you so much for being here today. And also, this does right an unintended consequence of our redistricting, so it made the most sense to be able to represent each campus of Washburn University, the tech schools, and the main campus in those 3 regions areas. So and you'll see that this was brought forward and every one of the House members of the Shawnee County delegation supported it. So thank you. I just think this solves a bit of a problem.
Does. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Senator O'Shea.
Madam Chair, thank you. I think I do have a question.
Okay.
So previously, while it was the 3 Senate districts, it still had to be in the city?
These are city council districts, yes.
So I can see how currently it's the city council district, so it's definitely within the city of Topeka. But when it was previously the 3 Senate districts, our Senate districts are both city and then outside of city limits. So someone could have been.
No, actually,
Still had to
for
be in the
the, that's a great, that is a very good question, Senator O'Shea. Actually, they corresponded to the Senate districts, but you had to be in the city limits of the Senate district. That's a great question.
Thank you for that clarifying. I'm seeing no more questions from the committee. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Committee, I do anticipate that we will be working on this bill tomorrow. We are going to close the hearing on Senate Bill 2092, and now we will start our hearing on House Bill 2060. And that's establishing the Special Education and Related Services Funding Task Force. So again, Tamara Lawrence, our reviser, with an overview on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 2060 would establish the Special Education and Related Services Funding Task Force, which would have the following duties: study and make recommendations for changes in the existing formula for funding special education and related services, conduct hearings and receive and consider suggestions from teachers, parents, the Department of Education, the State Board of Education, other governmental officers and agencies, and the general public concerning special education and related services funding, and make and submit reports to the legislature on the work and recommendations of the task force, including recommendations for legislative changes that would be submitted on or before January 14th. The task force would be made up of 10 members that you can see starting on page 1 in line 9. Members of the task force would be appointed by July 1, 2023. The Speaker of the House would designate the member who would call the first meeting of the task force, and at that first meeting, the members would select the chairperson and vice chairperson. The bill does authorize members of the task force to be paid allowances for expenses, mileage, and subsistence if approved by the Legislative Coordinating Council. The bill would also repeal the statute that had previously established a special education and related services task force that did cease to exist per statute on June 30th of 2011. So a similar task force did exist, but it ended in 2011. This bill would repeal the existence of that statute. The bill would take effect on publication in the Kansas Register and pass the House on a vote of 83 to 37, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Committee, what questions do you have for our reviser? Senator Petty.
And Tamara, I don't know if you have this information, but you mentioned the previous one that was this repeals that ended in 2011. Had it been in place for a period of time, or was it?
Yes, the bill that it enacted, the statute that created that task force, was in 2008. So from 2008 to 2011, that task force existed.
And then it was just, the legislation was just there, but it wasn't in existence? Is that the case?
Correct. The last line of the statute says, the task force shall cease to exist on June 30th, 2011. So that was in the original legislation enacting that first task force.
It had a sunset.
Correct, yes.
Thank you.
Committee, any additional questions? Senator Sykes.
Thank you. Going back to that original task force, was the structure very similar to like this current one? Is it similar to what it was?
It's not exactly the same, but it was similar. That task force had 12 members. The one in the bill before you has 10. And the statute, I can give you that number, is 723441. And you can read in subsection A the makeup of that task force specifically.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you so much. So committee, we do have proponent testimony. It's Monica Ross, the program coordinator for infant and toddler services in Johnson County. Monica, are you with us?
Yes, I'm on WebEx. Thank you for introducing me, Chair Baumgartner and members of the committee. I do work for Johnson County Infant Toddler Services. I'm the program coordinator. We're an agency that provides special education to children under the age of 3. There are 29 different programs across the state of Kansas. And each one of our programs is housed within a school district or an educational service center, which is how we're able to tap into the special education funding for qualified personnel, including therapists, early childhood special education teachers, physical therapists, occupational therapists. And then we also receive the special education funding to cover travel expenses, which for our particular program is crucial because we provide services where the child resides at home, daycares, or in the community setting. So we do a lot of traveling in Part C early intervention. We provide 17 different special education services, which are outlined by IDEA. And I come before you today to ask that one of the special education task force members be an infant toddler program coordinator, so we can have that representation for children receiving special education for kids under the age of 3. Early intervention is a really important investment for Kansas special education. About 30% of the children that are in our program in Part C no longer qualify for services by the time they reach their 3rd birth date. And I'm also a member of the Tiny K Alliance, which is an organization that does advocacy across the state. We are in support of the Special Education Task Force, but again, we request that one amendment be made, and that would be to include a infant toddler program coordinator so we can ensure that appropriate focus and attention is given to all children receiving special education from birth through age 21. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your focus on special education, and I'm happy to stand for questions if needed.
Committee, we are at that point. Since Monica is our only proponent testimony, are there questions for Monica? Monica, could you share with us, you said that there are 29 different programs. Are those fairly evenly distributed throughout the state of Kansas?
They are. They're distributed either by county. Johnson County is a very populated area of Kansas, so we serve only Johnson County. But as you get into the more western or southern areas of Kansas, typically they serve multiple counties. So it depends on the size of the county, and that really depends on whether or not the infant toddler program serves one or more than one counties.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other questions, so we will now move on to our neutral testimony. And we have Scott Rothschild, Communications Editor for the Kansas Association of School Boards, that's here with his neutral testimony. Welcome again to the committee.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. Good to see you all today. Thank you for the opportunity to present testimony on House Bill 2060. Kansas teachers and paras diligently try to provide the best education they can to the nearly 1 in 5 Kansas students receiving special education services. We basically are providing neutral testimony because we have 2 concerns with the bill. The first is that we believe the makeup of the task force should have a broader representation. As was kind of mentioned earlier, historically, the previous special education task force carved out specific membership from education organizations such as KASB, KNEA, and USA Kansas, which represent school boards, administrators, and teachers. These are the people who will be responsible for implementing or living with any changes that may emanate from this task force. Our second concern is we hope that such a study will not delay a needed increase for special education funding. We believe increased funding for special education should be budgeted and not linked to any other education proposals. So we believe we support the governor's 5-year phase-in of special education funding. So we believe we support the funding. We support a task force, perhaps with a broader representation, and we support efforts to try to get the federal government to provide more funding too. And hopefully all these things can be done at the same time. And if you all have any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them.
Now is the time. You are only neutral testimony, so what questions do we have for Mr. Rothschild? Senator Petty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Scott, as we found out from the revisor that the former special ed legislation had been sunsetted and was in place, I think it was for 3 years, passed in 8 and sunsetted in 11. So I just wanted to see if you would express your feelings, what you thought about this, if this legislation moved ahead. Is there a necessity, do you think there's a necessity that should be ongoing with no determination of ending?
Well, I think it should have a determination for an ending, but how long that would go, I don't know. I think we were, I looked at the old task force and the representation was a little bit broader. So I thought that would be, we thought that would be a good thing to recommend. But as far as, I mean, task force usually do have an ending once they complete their tasks.
Thank you.
Other questions, committee? If you could please share the testimony that you just gave us with your recommendations. Did you give that same testimony on the House side?
Yes.
Okay. And there were no amendments?
Well, I'm a little unclear what the House did because I think they put the Special Education Task Force into the bill that they just voted on.
They did put it in the House substitute, but I didn't know if there, perhaps, does our revisor know if there were any amendments made before they put it into House substitute for 83?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The membership of the task force is the same, but because it's in a proviso in Senate Bill 83, some of the additional requirements and statements, such as the bill before you has a requirement, for example, that the staff of the Office of Revisers of Statutes, Legislative Research Department, and Division of Administrative Services will provide such assistance as may be required. Those kinds of statements were pulled out for the simplification of the proviso.
Okay, but the bill wasn't changed itself. All right. Okay, thank you.
If I could add.
Questions? Yes, Senator Sykes.
Not a question, but can we get a copy of Scott's testimony? I don't see it, and I refreshed, but just to, okay. I refreshed and I got Tamara's, but I didn't get his.
Any other questions, sir?
I'm not seeing any other questions, but why don't you hold on and see if they still can't find it?
If I could add in the proviso, I believe it only has 1 year of funding because it's tied to that special education.
Right, the 1 year. Proviso would be limited to the 1 year. So are you seeing it in your email yet?
I'm sorry.
And several of us serve on the same committee a committee that met at 8:30 this morning, and, you know, we've had a few little interesting technical issues. Yep.
Okay. Should I send it back again, or?
We're going to say that we're going to let them look at it real quickly and see if they have a question for you
Oh,
based on that.
Okay.
An email. Senator Dietrich or Sykes, did you have a question?
So thank
Senator
you so much,
Dietrich.
and thank you for getting this document. For some reason, it just wasn't dropping down properly. So on a lot of the task force that we've had over the years for different things, like the most recently that I served on was dyslexia task force. We did look at changing some of the membership just to make it more appropriate and get good information from people who actually work with dyslexic students, whether it's in the public schools or in the private sector. And so I do think that having folks who have some experience helps the membership and also to derive reasonable, accommodations and recommendations. And so I don't really have a question, but I do think that probably does make sense to expand that membership a little bit, or narrow it to folks who have some expertise in that area that many of us may not.
And if I could say, in the other special ed task force, the 3 members that were carved out for KSB and USA, they had to come from 3 different sized school districts. So you had the small districts, the middle size, and the big ones.
Senator Sykes.
This is probably going to be for Tamara, but on the bill where like the 2 members appointed by the President of the Senate, those, it's not designating that it has to be a legislator. It could be anyone.
You are correct. The bill just speaks to 2 members appointed by the Speaker of the House, 2 members appointed by the President, yes.
I guess, Madam Chair, I think as we work the bill, maybe making sure that we're getting the appropriate people onto the task force.
Okay. I think that this is, I appreciate your feedback, and thank you to Cindy for getting that up via email since the S drive was clunky today. So committee, I would urge you to kind of talk to each other and make sure that we're not waiting until the bitter end so that Tamara can get started on some amendments. And so you might want to, I know typically we kind of keep amendments to ourselves, but you might want to make sure that you are talking with each other so that we get that right mix of membership if that is what you're wanting to really kind of guide and direct. And we'll give some flexibility to amend amendments when we are working the bill, but I just want to caution the committee, any changes to amendments that we make while we're in committee because of the time of our committee means we won't be able to turn that bill in that day. And we want to make sure that we can be, we want to keep the process moving so that, that we really can establish a Senate position on this particular issue. So yes, Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I'm just reviewing the makeup of the task force, and Tim, I just want to make sure I'm understanding these right. So 2 members from the Speaker, 2 members from the President, 1 by the Minority Leader of the Senate, 1 by the Minority Leader of the House, 1 by the State Board of Ed, 2 by the State Department of Ed, so 5, and they can be anybody. The only one that's really specified is a parent of a current student who is receiving special education services. Really, that's the only one that's designated. So to me, that provides ultimate flexibility in making sure, I mean, it could be a building administrator, a teacher. I mean, it provides the ultimate flexibility in making sure we get exactly the right, and not people because of a title, but the exact right people to the table. So in my opinion, I kind of like the flexibility. It can be any one of those people so designate, and it seems to me like there's a good balance between who's appointing a makeup, or, it's balanced on who's appointing those. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I think one of the things that hasn't been brought up is certainly the way in which we deliver special education in school districts in our state. So we certainly have those that provide the special education in the classroom and that they are employees of the district. And then we also have that collaboration where it is, where it's a separate facility and a variety of different school districts then send kids to that facility. And then we have that third cohort that they pool the money, and those individuals are hired by that cohort, though they serve a multiple of different districts. So I think it just, maybe not so much it needs to be a certain position, but just making sure that the different types of delivery systems are recognized. And I think it's also important for us to encourage those decision makers as far as appointments, that we have good representation throughout the state. So, any other questions? I'm not seeing any, so thank you for holding tight with us there, Scott, at the podium while we made sure that we had an opportunity to read through your testimony. I do want to make the committee aware that we did have neutral written only, one from Daniel Klassen, Education Policy Advisor for Kansas Action for Children, as well as testimony from Patty Zurich, President, Kansas Parents Teachers Association. Committee, we are now at this time going to close the hearing on House Bill 2060. Tomorrow we have a hearing on Senate Bill 304, and that is us authorizing the State Board of Education to establish a new unified school district if necessary for the attachment of territory for a school district disorganized via voter petition. This is going to be a little bit more technical in nature than what we have often had for hearings. So you may want to just kind of scan through Senate Bill 304 ahead of time. And again, any amendments that you think you might want on bills that we have heard prior, please make sure that we get those turned in to Tamara. And I will just go ahead and make that request. If we could, with regard to Senate Bill 2092, if you could simply give us an amendment that we could use tomorrow that would be changing the effective date. So committee, thank you for your work. This will be a record for us to be. You will actually have a few minutes to burn before we get up on the Senate floor. Thank you, and we are adjourned.